Hello and welcome to Mr. Linford's math course. In today's discussion, we're going to be finishing up a previous talk on clearing fractions and decimals. We've already talked about what rational numbers are and the process of clearing them, clearing these fractions from our equations and turning them into whole numbers. We're going to continue on using this technique and these ideas to clear decimals now. What we want to do is use these techniques that we've learned about clearing fractions to now take decimals and to turn them into whole numbers. So let's go ahead and try working on a problem to begin with. Here we have an equation where the coefficients are all decimals. If you remember from our previous work, what we used to do was select a number, a common denominator, some number big enough that all of the denominators went into it. And since it was big enough, we would multiply it to both sides and we would cancel out all of the denominators. That's the idea of clearing fractions. Think about how we can use that to get rid of decimals. How can we take a decimal and turn it into a whole number? There's actually a couple different ways of doing this. And in class at times, whenever I ask students, generally they come up with these different methods. Each person has their own preferred technique for thinking about it. What I'd like you to do is pause the video and think about this. How can we take these decimals and turn them into whole numbers? Remember, you only have two techniques for manipulating equations. You can add whatever you want to both sides, and you can multiply whatever you want to both sides. Again, I don't think adding is going to help you out here, because these are different terms. They involve x's and some don't, so hint, hint. Think about what you could multiply to both sides to get this to being whole numbers. All right, take a minute, see what you come up with. All right, let's see what you got. So, one of the things that I'd like to do is start with the more elaborate method for clearing decimals and then work our way to more shortcuts. First up, decimals. I don't really like decimals because students tend to think of decimals as being their own kind of category of numbers. Decimals are really just a way of writing numbers, okay? They're kind of a way of approximating. These decimals here, 0.55, 0.6, 2.05, they're fractions. These numbers are rational. These numbers are rational numbers. They're fractions. Here, I'll show you. 0.55. This is 55 hundredths. Remember, you have the tenths place and the hundredths place. So 0.55 is the same thing as 55 over 100. 0.6, that's the tenths place. That's 6 over 10. 2.05, you go out to the hundredths place. So you have 205 over 100. Or you have 2 and 5 over 100. So really, all of these decimals are fractions. Now, okay, I'm going to be careful here. I don't want to misspeak. Not all decimals are fractions, okay? What do I mean by that? The number pi, 3.14, what is it, 15, blah, 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 blah. Pi is approximated by a decimal that cannot be written as a fraction, okay? Pi can't be written as a fraction. We have decimal approximations for it. So I don't want people to get confused and think all decimals are fractions. For the most part, but, when we approximate stuff, not exactly. So anyways, in this case, let's go ahead and just rewrite these. So in terms of fractions, the equation is really 55 over 100x minus 6 over 10. And I'll write 205 over 100x. So this is actually pretty simple. You have the denominators of 100 and 10. So what can we multiply both sides by? We'll multiply by 100. Multiply each thing by 100. And we should be able to cancel out all of the denominators. So let's see what we get. Obviously, these hundreds are going to cancel out, and you're left with 55x. You have 100 times 6 is 600 divided by 10. 600 divided by 10 is just 60. And then, let's see, those hundreds are going to cancel out, and you're left with 205x. That was pretty easy, wasn't it? All we did was we rewrote the decimals as fractions, so that way we could see what the denominators are. We could see what we can easily multiply by, okay? This is just a simple problem. We've already done these before, and we can solve it from there. Let's talk now about a shortcut. How we could just jump from the original equation down to the simplified version. One of the things that you could do is, when working with decimals, let's say I have 0.55. If I wanted to move the decimal place over, I would have to multiply by 10. That's a little trick that we have, right? Anytime you want to move the decimal place, you have to multiply by 10. So anytime I move it over to the right, that means I've multiplied it by 10. So if I want to move it over twice, that means I've multiplied it by 100. So I can look at all three of these numbers here, and I can say to myself, what do I have to move the decimal over? How many times do I have to move the decimal? Well, I got to move it over 2 times at the most, right? So I should multiply each thing by 100. So if I took 100 times 0.55x and 100 times 0.6, and then 100 times 2.05x, that means I'm just moving the decimal 2 places for everything. 55x minus 60 equals 205x. And it's as simple as that. We can go ahead and solve this. I'll subtract 55x from both sides. I have negative 60 equals, let's see, 205 minus 55. Well, minus 5 gets me to 200, minus the rest of the 50 gets me to 150x. And then if I divide that, I get negative 60 over 150 equals x. We could simplify that, but we're good for right now. So this is the idea of clearing decimals. It's actually pretty simple. You can either first turn it into a fraction and then clear the fraction. That's option 1. Little more work. Or you can say to yourself, a little bit of a shortcut. You just think, how many decimal places do I need to move everything over, right? And I have to move the same amount of decimal places because I got to multiply by the same number. So, well, if I move 2 decimal places over for everything, that should be good. That'll turn everything into a whole number. So just multiply everything by 100. That's the more shortcut technique. Again, do what you prefer. Do which makes sense to you, okay? But that's the idea of clearing decimals. Hopefully this is making sense to you and you're feeling comfortable with it. If you have any questions, please let me know. My email is klinford, that's KLINFORD, at wccnet.edu. Let me know if you have any questions or if you need me to go over anything more. All right, and until next time, take care.